The water companies are back in the news this week, and not in a good way. South East Water has left tens of thousands of customers without water because of an infrastructure failure, and this follows on from a similar failure in Tunbridge Wells just before Christmas. So what's new? The water companies have not invested sufficiently in infrastructure. The system doesn't work in the way it should. This is the story that just keeps on giving. It's just unbelievable. Nobody thinks that water privatisation was a good idea. Absolutely nobody thinks that. And yet we're stuck with it because nobody knows what to do. So a good moment probably to revisit this image here, which tells us something about water privatisation. This is the amount of money here in blue, about £6 billion that the government got when they sold off the water companies. That's adjusted for inflation. And this is a figure getting on for 10 times as big that the water companies, the English water companies, have paid to their shareholders in the 30 years since that sell-off. And actually that data goes to 2019, so by now it would be a good bit more. So the money is flowing out of the water companies to their shareholders. They're not putting enough money into the investment required for the infrastructure to work properly. All that money could have gone into investment if the government had held on to the water companies in the first place. In fact, if you subtract the blue section from the green section, so to speak, then you can see how much money would have been available to the government if it had held on to the water companies to invest in infrastructure. And so this leads us to something that we must remember when we think about the water privatisation, and that is that the way it's structured is that customers, through their bills, pay for all the investment the water companies make, pretty much. So they're allowed to charge extra on the bill in order to raise the money to invest in pipes and sewage plants and all the things that keep breaking. So those infrastructure investments, they don't really belong to the water companies. They belong to the customers because the customers have paid for them. And that's the fundamental problem in the system, because the government and the system treats those infrastructure investments as belonging to the companies, even though it wasn't their money that built them. And so when it comes to re-nationalisation, when it comes to trying to get out of this extraordinary mess, the government is saying, hang on a minute, we can't afford to re-nationalise the water companies because they're so valuable, because they own all this infrastructure, all this money that's been invested. And all they need to do to sort that problem is to say, hang on a minute, it wasn't the companies that invested that money, it was the customers who invested that money. So that infrastructure belongs to the customers, it doesn't belong to the companies. And if we want to renationalise those companies, we don't need to pay them for that infrastructure investment because it wasn't their money in the first place.